Greetings and merry meet, witches. Welcome to episode 59 for Ostara, or the spring equinox 2020.
Hello and welcome to Reaching for the Moon, presented by Everglades Moon Local Council, Florida chapter of Covenant of the Goddess. COG supports individual works by its covens, members, and local councils. It's a vibrant network of a myriad of Wiccan and witchy resources, religious support, friendships, service opportunities, and more. To find out more, visit our website, emlc.net, our Facebook page, facebook.com/EvergladesMoon, or Twitter, @EMLCTweets.
Hey, this is Lady Bridget, and we're going to bring you a workshop today called The Goddess Asteroids by Equitas. He presented this workshop at Turning the Tides last year, and it was fascinating. I think you'll get a lot out of it. Even if you're not an astrologer, it'll give you something to ask the next time you get your chart read by your favorite astrologer. And if you don't have a favorite astrologer, well, Equitas gives his contact information, I believe, at the end of the podcast. If not, no worries. We will be sure to put it in the show notes. I've had readings with him, and he's really good. And we're going to have Pandie give us our Pandie's Pagan project for Ostara, which is dyeing eggs using natural dyes. I wanted to keep the music light this episode with so much coronavirus talk and everything being so heavy. I decided to keep the music really light. So we're going to bring you two fun songs. One is by the Crow Women called We Are the Witches, and it's from their new album Seasons, which can be purchased on cdbaby.com. And the second song, which will be the last one on the podcast, is one that I wrote. I filked. It's a filk. I'm admitting it. I filk. Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be witches. I think you'll get a laugh out of it. I know we had fun recording it. And I hope you enjoy the entire episode. And whatever you do, remember, stay safe. And we love you. Happy Ostara. Blessed be.
We are the witches, see our brooms. We keep pet toads in our rooms. They are guys that done us wrong, but now they sing a sorry song. Ribbit, ribbit. We are the witches, we like cats. They like to snuggle unlike bats, but then they see our pointy hats, and suddenly our hats are flat.
Bad cat.
We are the witches stirring our cauldrons, newts and toadstools, bubbling potions. Smells like chicken, tastes like slime, so keep on stirring, give it time. We are the witches, we like mead. It's mostly legal, unlike weed. Honey and yeasties, bubbling brew. We joyfully hoist a glass or two. We are the witches, we like crows. They always wear their best black clothes. We know they love their shiny things and glitter on their blue-black wings. We are the witches, we ride brooms. Over the rooftops we are flumed. We buzz the courthouse in the full moon and happily sing a witchy tune. Earth, air, fire, water, come to me. Gaia's daughter, come to me. Mirrodin sun, ancient spirits, mighty ones.
Hi everyone. I'm just recording the content lecture part, and then we do the interactions that will not be recorded. So your personal business will not be broadcast all over the internet. And if you'd like to give me your name, just need your first name, your email, and your phone number. If you would like to join my my email list. I just post when I'm teaching classes here in Miami. In astrology, I teach at Luna Bohemia, and I also do readings there. If you're outside of Miami, I can do readings one-on-one by phone, Skype, whatever. Okay? Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I am going to talk a little bit today about the goddess asteroids and how they relate to your astrology chart and how they relate to everyone and the world. And I can go off on major tangents, so so please ask questions to help me keep focused, or you want to know more about something. I'm going to quickly do the solar system here. This is the physical solar system, but we use it in astrology. So we've got the sun, and then we've got Mercury is very right next to the sun. And then, does anybody know the next planet out from the... Right, Venus, very good. So I'm drawing the symbols, so you get that. And then, does anybody know what's next?
Third rock from the
Okay,
sun.
and the symbol in astrology is, this is the Earth symbol. And some astrologers put an E there just to distinguish it, because we're in the physical plane, the cross of matter. Also, esoteric and spiritual astrology, too, we'll be talking about. So does anybody know the next one out from there? So there's the symbol. And then we've got this big space here, right, which we're going to talk about today. And then we've got Jupiter, another asteroid, Saturn, and then another asteroid called Chiron. We don't have time to talk about that today. There's a whole 2-hour lecture just on that. And then we've got Uranus, Neptune, and then this is how I do the Pluto symbol. In astrology, and so I'm gonna talk about, does everybody know what the gender binary means? Like masculine and feminine, but in our Western society, we tend to highly polarize those two energies and archetypes as to like extreme masculinity and extreme femininity. And if you really think about it, nobody does that all the time. And it's actually kind of unhealthy because it's very extreme. To always be like what we associate masculinity with, aggressive and commanding and getting it my way and enforcing your will all the time. Who wants to hang out with that person? And then somebody that is so helpless and needs to defer to everyone else and just have no strength or will, or so those are our extremes, right? And so I want to, because we're talking about goddess asteroids, so if you are like a very burly lumberjack man, right? And how does the goddess asteroids relate to me? So we're going to talk about that. And I want to sort of reprogram our thinking about gender as simply what we associate with masculinity is just your will. No matter what the circumstances are, you enforce your will. What gets called as feminine is before you make a move, you assess the situation and then you work with the circumstances. Okay, so I want to kind of unburden and some of our baggage around gender conversations for us socially. And so males have goddess asteroids in their chart, and it's a great way to connect with that energy. So we find balance, right? Instead of being extreme one or the other, we want to, in a lot of our metaphysical work, have union, divine union of the masculine and feminine, and be whole and complete, right? Okay, so what happened here? Now, in astrology, when we physically discover a new planet in the solar system, astrologers like to go, ooh, what does this mean? What's going on? Because a new thing has manifested into our consciousness. Yes?
Are we missing one?
What are we missing?
Luna.
Oh, the moon, yes. So it's over here. Sorry. Thank you. Yes, we are.
As a Cancerian moon child. Yeah.
Yes, the Cancers got very mad at me that I forgot to put the moon sign up there. Okay, great. So, sorry about that. So what about this space here? So when we discover for example, Pluto, we discovered in the 1930s, like physically as a thing out there. And what was also happening in the 1930s, the rise of Nazi Germany, the breadcrumbs leading up to World War II. And if we know about the Pluto archetype and Pluto transits in our own chart, that is a major, very scorpionic, intense, death. Like there's a lot of heavy themes, right, associated with that planet. So it's very interesting when we discovered that. Now, we discovered the goddess asteroids in the 1800s. Okay? And it was like 1801, 1802, 1803. You can Google for the facts about it. And if you think about what was happening in history, and by the way, the asteroid, there are just tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands, like pebbles this big floating out there, to things that are even bigger than Pluto in the asteroid belt, okay? So there's just so much stuff out there. Now, if we think about it, the sun is associated with masculine. I'm going to just put M in astrology. It's considered a masculine planet. Mercury is considered masculine. Venus, obviously feminine. The Earth is feminine. Moon is feminine. Masculine. And then we've got masculine, 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 masculine archetypal associations. So it's like a lot of patriarchal heavy conversations that in our interpretations. So where is the, so what about the feminine? So like we need to have some balance here, right? So the goddess asteroids, and if people think about what was happening at the 1800s, it's a little bit early, but that was the start of the early vestiges of the women's movement, right? That really started to pick up around 1850, 1860. And then you had the Seneca Falls Conference in the later 1800s. And also the conversation about emancipating slaves. Also, the breadcrumbs of that were starting to happen. Yes?
Does the Industrial Revolution and women going into the workplace as well?
What year was that? I am not a history person. I'm an astrologer.
The Revolution was in the 1800s.
Okay, yes.
And more women were going into the workplace.
Yes.
To work in the mills
right.
and the factories.
So, and if you think about it, the conversation about gender, like men do the work and women stay at home, that all got right. So yes, I would agree with that, right? Because it definitely fits what was going on here. So there are 4 main asteroids that we can really see. In fact, NASA launched, it's called the Dawn mission. It actually, I think, landed or got close to Ceres, which is the first and largest asteroid that we're going to talk about and how astrologers use it in your astrology chart when we do interpretations. And so, and interestingly, they're full of resources. Those of us who are interested in like colonizing outer space or getting out there, asteroids are where it's at because they're full of minerals and water and ice and all kinds of stuff that would make more sense to actually go there first before going on planets, which could be very difficult. Okay, so around the 1800s. Now, what's interesting also, we didn't have an ephemeris. What is an ephemeris? This is this big book of all the planetary positions by longitude in the zodiac. All right. So astrologers need to look this book to see like where are your planets in your chart by sign, and then we do interpretation. We didn't have an ephemeris, now watch this number, for the goddess asteroids until the 1970s. So the fact that we actually wrote a book to like acknowledge where is this stuff, so astrologers could actually start using the goddess asteroids in interpretations for everyone's charts. So we actually had a book, and then that corresponded also with, in the 1960s, the civil rights movement and the women's movement. And it's interesting. So what is the connection between, like, civil rights and slavery and women's issues? Women were considered property of men, and slaves were definitely considered property of the man. So it's just a shift in our consciousness that reflects what we've been all going through in society. Now, so that's at the global level. Now, what about the personal level? It's your way to get reintegrated to the divine, to have a balancing of the divine feminine and masculine within ourselves so that we can be whole and complete and not be so polarized in one or the other or unbalanced. Okay? Does this make sense? Everybody following? Okay. All right, so now let's talk about the 4 main asteroids. And I'm going to draw the picture. And this is so easy to do in a pagan group because we'll get through this part real quick. So the first one we have is Ceres. Okay? And this is also Demeter. Okay? Or Demeter. So who would like to tell me a little bit about the Ceres-Demeter myth? And from the myth, that's where we get the interpretations and also how it applies to your chart. And I'm going to show you some example charts. Yes, she's the grain mother.
Abundance.
Yes. And in astrology, it's actually more than the moon, your nurturing style of how you create and then harvest resources. It's also connected to money in your chart, so you don't just use Venus for your money cycle or your second house. In astrology, you can also incorporate this archetype as well. So, quick synopsis of the Demeter archetype, yeah.
Okay, so Persephone is supposedly kidnapped by Hades, gets brought down into the underworld. Demeter was pissed off, put the whole world into winter until she sent Mercury, or Mercury went to Zeus and said, hey, people are dying, you gotta do something. He sent Mercury down into Hades and said, let her go, man, and then that's how it went.
Yes. So from that, when we see Ceres, the asteroid, prominent in the astrology chart, so what do I mean by prominent? Like very close to your ascendant, or a planet, or a very important point on your chart, like first, fourth, seventh, or 10th house, or very close to that house cusp. Literally, there can be some type of, whether you're female, male, transgender, however you identify, there could be some, sexual non-consent backstory to your life, okay? And I'm actually going to show 2 examples of this in charts that I've personally done readings with. And, I very carefully broached that conversation, and then the client, nodded their head and said, yes, I was, non-consensual sexual abuse happened to me, right? It can also, because it's about grain mother, eating disorders can also show up in this archetype. Caretakers of the sick and infirmed, and also loss, empty nest syndrome, which many people, if you're a parent, can experience later in life, because obviously when Demeter was a small child, Persephone was a small child, Demeter, had to then deal with, my daughter has grown up and now she's leaving me, and now, so that can impact in your chart. Yes?
How about the fact that the symbol is shaped like a sickle?
Right, for harvesting, yes, yeah. So, yes, it's shaped like a sickle. There's death, rebirth stuff, yes. It's super pagan. Okay, any other questions about, now, Ceres did actually have a successful relationship with Iasion, and that was later in her archetypal mythological life story. So it's not like, there's an abusive relationship, but on the plus side, there is a happy, fulfilled relationship possible also when this is in the chart. Okay? Any other questions? Okay. So then we've got Pallas Athena, and it's shaped like a diamond, like this. And this is very much the Athena archetype. So who can tell me about Athena? What are some of her key characteristics that she's known for?
Beauty. Wisdom. Beauty.
Yes. Beauty, wisdom. And what did she do? What was her big job for the... It wasn't so much... She was a protectress. She wouldn't just go to war like Mars did just for the fun of it or for adventure or conquest. She did it to protect the society. So when Pallas Athena is strong in the chart, you will often be like a big sister or big brother to a younger, more vulnerable person. Or that is done to you. Okay, you are the little one and you have a big protector in your chart, right? So that archetype can play out either way. And by the way, because we've really only been looking at these since the 1970s, astrologers are still trying to figure out how these all play out in our lives. It's not like the moon and Saturn and Jupiter, which for thousands of years we've been studying how that happens in the chart. This is kind of a new conversation even in the astrological community. And just to mention, if you're interested in this whole conversation, Demetra George is by far, she's written books, she has YouTube videos. She's considered the authority on goddess asteroids. So if you want a deeper dive into this conversation, you can check that out.
Sorry,
so,
what's her name again?
Demetra George, and I think in the app for the festival, I put her name and a website. It'll give you more info on that. She's a super famous astrologer. Arts and crafts, also associated here with Pallas Athena. So she's protectress, big sister. So for example, we've seen Pallas Athena. It also has to do with career, especially careers for women. Because it's interesting that, in ancient Greek society and Roman, this was an acceptable form of femininity that fit within their society, as long as you were doing sort of like masculine things. That's sort of what fit, right? So there's a lot of things like women entering the corporate workspace, and so that's how in modern times we'll see that archetype play out. Okay, so Juno is the next one, and it kind of looks like this. Or Hera, okay? Juno, Hera, Greek and Roman names for very similar archetypes. So who would like to tell me about Juno or Hera? What do we know what happened with her? She was the wife of Zeus, Zeus, Jupiter. Now what's interesting...
All the time. He cheated on her.
So now what's interesting is Zeus was after her, and she said she would not submit to him, and she said, I will submit to you but we have to get married first. I want a commitment from you. So Juno is the archetype of the female, it's marriage, and the female or the male that wants to be equal with their partner. That's the spiritual message of Juno. And then having sometimes to endure the trials of not being treated as an equal and still standing your ground and saying, no, I will. Now, Juno went a little overboard because she would kill the offspring of the illegitimate whatever and did some terrible things. So that's sort of also the scorned Juno archetype, which can show in clients' charts. So we got to watch about the dark Juno. All of these archetypes have a very high octave and then a low octave about how they can play out in our lives, right? Okay? So it's marriage, divorce, cheating, all of that stuff. Could be even domestic violence, threats, deception, because that was part of the myth. But it's the desire for partnership. And more than Venus in your astrology chart, Venus is more about sexual attraction and what gives your relationship, that zing and that energy. Juno is more about how you want to do the partnership, like the day-to-day life in a partnership in your relationships with significant others in your life. Okay? So, it's equals versus unequals conversations. Okay? Okay, and the last one is Vesta. Now, if you take a look at the symbol, to me it kind of looks like the Wonder Woman symbol. A little bit. But if you take a look at it, what does that look like? Yes, the fire. Right. So does anybody know about the Vestal virgins way back in the day who were not virginal in the modern sense? Okay? So.
Virgin in the ancient sense meant they had no children, not that they weren't sexually right.
So in some of the, a lot of this conversation got lost over time, and when we had the rise of other powers in our Western civilization, they stamped out these were attempted by, I'm not going to name any names, but other forces in our Western civilization to stamp out and shut away these archetypes for women and men, right? And yes, thank you. And this is an expression of the sacred sexuality. Sexual healing, yes. And sometimes in the ancient cults, you would go, and it was basically a sacred orgy, okay? And in many of our practices that we have in Wicca and Pagan adjacent, whatever, there is that, right? We are rebuilding and healing that wound that got shut down, right? And basically, a lot of these, you can imagine an orgy. You've never been one in yourself. It's dark and there's a lot of things going on and there's probably a lot of wine happening. And if children were born from those unions, they were considered like sacred because it was like random chance, like the gods. Right, because it wasn't like I like you and let's figure it out. There was no human intervention, if you will. It was all divine because you were in that ecstatic orgy. And so they were considered virginal because they were not attached to a male, okay, in a traditional sense. So Vesta also has to do with the hearth and home. And the priestesses had to keep the sacred flames going in the temple. You could not let that flame go out. That was very bad. So that was their job, to keep the flame going. So anyways, a lot of that archetype. So also a badly aspected Vesta could mean a person that has their sexuality shut down or frigid, or has, connection issues with a nice flow of their sexual energy. So that can also show up, right? Okay?
I know with him as well, it was like almost an instant death penalty to attack or assault or anything against the Vestal.
Yes. Yeah.
It was, one of the biggest taboos.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. This was a very sacred job and position in society, and then throughout our Western history, this got, considered the complete opposite. And I think, in this community, we've discovered this archetype and are working with it. So these are really great to reintegrate all of this into ourselves, right? And I think, as I'm telling these stories, you can think about your own life and how these show up. And again, no matter how you identify your gender or any of that, right? We all have these energies and archetypes as a part of us, right? Okay, so just want to share a few examples. I read it for a client recently, and they had Juno right down here in the chart. So this is the first house, the ascendant, and then this is the fourth house. So fourth house has to actually do with the home. So she had Juno here, and I said it was very important for you. You wanted that, home and husband and that whole thing, but did something happen with you and the ex? And I got a big nod. Yes. So there was cheating involved. So this is an example, how it shows up in a client chart that I read for very recently. Another way this showed up, and this was one of the first readings I started to do publicly. What did she have? Did I pull up that chart? Yes.
When you say publicly, you're not talking, obviously, pulling someone and doing a reading in public.
No, oh yeah.
You're talking
Thank you. Yes, this was yes. You don't have these conversations publicly. This was a private reading when I started doing this, besides oh, Anna, you're my friend. Let me read your chart and practice on you. When I became more of a professional astrologer, publicly professional astrologer. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and which also brings up, and by the way, anybody can call themselves an astrologer, and one of the ways that I believe very strongly in getting an accreditation of some type is I'm accredited with NCGR, National Center for Geocosmic Research, and they have a code of ethics that we abide by. So clearly in a lot of these conversations, where there might be sexual abuse or some heavy duty stuff, we are trained to really approach those conversations very delicately. In fact, in this one reading, I told her the story of the myth versus so I don't want to trigger anyone, and, and I said, does that myth make any sense to you? And she had Ceres, I think, right here, and 2 degrees away from her ascendant, and then Juno right here. And so by the way, ethically, I feel it's important for the client's safety. We're there to work for the client. If astrologer, you're getting a reading and they start pushing you around, get somebody else. And I said, I told her the myth, and she verified that she was cheated on by her husband. The husband tried to abuse the younger sister. She had to protect and get and she had Pallas Athena also. She had to get the child out, and she herself was a victim of a survivor of that. And so and this is the power of including asteroids in your astrology reading, because we've just sort of rediscovered them and are using them. And in a lot of astrology charts, they may put Chiron in, but not the goddess asteroids. Sometimes I will talk about this with a client, but if they're hanging out here and they're not really aspecting anything, these situations may not show up for you so strongly, right? So, I think in our community, this is definitely a good one to look at, because it's very much connected to a lot of our practices that we might do. So this is great to know where your Vesta asteroid is.
How do you get that in your chart? It's I've never seen any of those symbols.
Yeah, this is all new. Now, software, and so I have a Mac, and IO was the only software really that worked with the Macintosh. Windows users, you have far more options. SolarFire is one of the best for Windows folks. Io closed their doors and they were bought out by, I think, SolarFire, but they're supporting a new Mac version that's even a little bit better. I haven't had a chance to upgrade yet because I was waiting for Mercury retrograde to be over with before I attempted something like that. So you can, like on Astrodynes or Astro.com, you have to tell the software, please include these goddess asteroids. And there's far more. Like, for example, there's a Hecate asteroid that you can put in.
You have to like know the astrological number or the
Yes. So I think the Hecate asteroid is number 100 for Heka, and so it's number 100. And so and I am a follower of Hecate, a devotee, and I put it in my chart, and it's totally conjunct 2 of my planets, and it's like makes a lot of sense. So
what does that mean for you?
That was very prominent that I was going to have that experience, and it's in my 7th house, so I obviously need to have a relationship with Hecate. And remember, the 7th house, the 1st house is you, but it's tricky. The 7th house is what you project on others or what you're not willing to own and integrate within yourself. So sometimes we find partners, which is indicated by the 7th house, that play out stuff that we're not willing to own because we're trying to get complete with that. Right? This is like depth astrology stuff, really.
Is there a symbol for Hecate?
No, because, well, I have a T-shirt that,
I know that,
yeah, but
I know, but
yes.
I mean, astrologically.
No, because like there's like thousands of asteroids out there, and it would be nice. Maybe you could create one and propose it to the whoever decides this stuff. Yes, yeah. Okay, so. And my software will, by the way, the handout's going around, so if you want to put your name and email, I can send you your chart with your goddess asteroids in it and Chiron for free, no charge. So just let me know, and you'll get at least your natal chart that way, and I'll make sure you put your birth date. But you may want to just email that to me, because in our modern age of identity theft, you have to be careful with even giving your astrologers your very identifying information, where you were born and all of that. So just heads up. Okay, so let's do some readings, and there's a lot of people here, so it's not possible, I think, to get to everyone's chart, but who's maybe never had an astrology reading before, or you've never had an astrology reading before? I don't believe this. Okay, all right. Okay, I saw your hand up go first. Who else's hand up? Oh, gosh. Okay, we're going to just start. So remember, you can book an astrology reading with me. And by the way, Kasha, who's our drawing raffle goddess back there, is I'm raffling off a free 45-minute reading if you win the raffle. So you can, if you're interested, put in a ticket for that, or you can just call me, contact me, and I'd be happy to schedule a time where we can really take the time to like read your chart. You know.
I won it one year and it was great.
Yes.
Last year it was fantastic.
Okay. Well, thank you. I paid them very highly to say that. Okay.
The payout will be at the end of the class.
Pardon?
The payout will be at the end of the class.
Yes. If you've never had an astrology reading before, we got to go over your natal, your secondary progressions, your transits. At least an hour and a half is good to get started. I print out all your charts. I study your charts for about an hour, and I like collect my thoughts, and yeah. No, I do Skype, Google Hangouts just by the phone. I can email you the chart. You don't have to. It's just a bunch of spaghetti if you don't understand astrology. But I'll just talk to you, right?
Wow, sorry for the abrupt ending there. But as Equitas said in the beginning of the workshop, he was not going to record the personal stuff, which I totally agree with, and I would have edited it out anyway. However, it meant that he didn't get a chance to give you his contact information. So in case anyone really wants a great astrology reading, in depth and personalized from a pagan perspective, not just your normal run-of-the-mill astrology reading, but someone who incorporates your spiritual life, your goals, and the goddess asteroids and everything else into it, Equitas can be reached at joemiami@gmail.com. So that's joemiami@gmail.com. I know he'd love to hear from you. He does readings by Skype, by Zoom, over email, by telephone, FaceTime. He's a very flexible guy. So I'm sure you would love it. And now on to the rest of our program.
Hi everyone, this is Pandie, and it's time for another one of Pandie's Pagan Projects. With Ostara and springtime just around the corner, everyone's talking about eggs. But we're all also very conscious of how we're decorating them. Who wants to spend all that money on a kit with colors that comes from who knows where when you can dye your own eggs naturally at home? And if you're like me, I tend to like to put natural offerings out for the gods, and my dyed eggs usually end up in some way, shape, or form being an offering. So I don't necessarily want to use store-bought dyes on my sacred springtime offerings. While this process may not be as easy as simply dropping a couple tablets into some vinegar, I have found this to be far more fun. Plus, it gives me the time to infuse the energy of the color into the egg. And I'm never worried that something is in the color tab and possibly seeping through my shells or through a crack in the egg, which I'll taste later. There are two ways you can approach natural dyeing eggs. You can either start with hard-boiled eggs, or you can boil the eggs as you're actually making the dye. Personally, I prefer to start with hard-boiled eggs and then let them soak in room temperature dye. But feel free to experiment with your eggs, and even try letting them dry between coats or dip them in multiple colors, which we're totally doing. To start, you're going to need your dyeing agents. These are the natural ingredients that will infuse our eggs with amazing colors. For our purposes, we're going to be using red cabbage, blueberries, turmeric, onion skins, beets, and even dark coffee. You'll also need a large pot, somewhere about 3 quarts or so, white vinegar, water, small bowls, your eggs, tongs, and paper towels. Those last two make things very much easier. I also recommend having some olive oil on hand for once everything is dry so that you can use it to oil the eggs and give them a little bit of a shine. You may also want to have gloves handy as we're making dyes, and these can dye and stain your skin. Also, you may want to have some cheesecloth or coffee filters to make the straining of the particulate out of the dye a little easier. Whew, that's a lot. So first we're going to make our dyes, and then we're going to use them. To make a color, pick the dyeing agent based on what color dyes you want to make. Put it in a pot with about 1/4 of water and 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. You may have to add more water if everything is not submerged. Don't worry, I'm about to give you amounts of everything. However, the process is the same for everything. Throw all your stuff in with 1/4 of water, 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, bring it to a boil, then lower the heat and allow your cauldron to simmer for about 30 minutes. Then strain the dye into a bowl and you're ready to dye. When we're dyeing, we'll typically leave our eggs in the dye for about 30 minutes or so, but you can leave them in the dye as long as you want, including overnight. Just make sure your bowl is deep enough and you have enough liquid in the bowl so that your eggs are completely submerged and they're not touching each other or the bowl itself. And now to the magic! What to use to get what colors. My suggestions, presume you're using white eggs. If you're using brown eggs or another color eggs, these will produce slightly different results when you use these dyes. Our red cabbage. Chop up your red cabbage. You'll need about 4 cups of chopped red cabbage. It will make a beautiful light blue dye. If you prefer a darker blue, you're going to use blueberries. 4 cups of blueberries are what you're going to add to your pot. Turmeric makes yellow dye. You'll need about 3 tablespoons of ground turmeric. Way easier than using the raw stuff, and you get better colors. To make orange eggs, you'll need onion skins. You'll need 3 cups of onion skins to make your dye, which is the equivalent of about 12 onions. Beets will make your eggs pink. You'll need 4 cups of chopped beets. And now we're going to get to mixing colors. So if you want just those regular colors, light blue, dark blue, yellow, orange, and pink, just make the dyes and soak your eggs in the dyes that we make. To make a green egg, you'll first soak your eggs in turmeric for about 30 minutes, and then you'll dip them in the chopped cabbage dye for 5 seconds. We're basically just coating our yellow eggs with a little bit of blue. If you're like me and you want to make some purple lavendery eggs, you'll first soak them in your beet solution for 30 minutes, and then they get a quick dip in the cabbage solution for about 30 seconds. If you prefer salmon, you can achieve that by first soaking it in turmeric for 30 minutes and then in the onion skin dye for 30 seconds. If you want brown, this is where your coffee comes in. To make brown eggs, you can simply boil your eggs in black coffee for 30 minutes or let them soak for at least 30 minutes to overnight. To get to a golden color, you can boil your eggs in the strained yellow turmeric dye for 30 minutes. It gives it a much richer color yellow than just soaking them in room temperature dye. Once your eggs are the color you want, remove them from their bowls with the tongs and pat them dry with the paper towels. You can also use your reusable kitchen towels, but they will get stained. Give your eggs a good rub with a little tiny bit of olive oil, and you're all set. This is a great activity for the whole family, whether it's you and your kids, you and your coven mates. In fact, if you can even split up the duties of making the different dyes, everybody gets their own dye, and then everybody gets together and shares colors to make a rainbow set of eggs. While the dyes are cooking, you can stir the pot to add in the energies you want to infuse in the eggs. And while the eggs are soaking, you can do the same, as well as any breath work, chant work, singing, or drumming to add even more energy into the mix. From here, you can decorate your eggs however you want. Magic markers, my favorite glitter, or however spirit moves you. Blessings of Primavera, happy Ostara, and blessed be.
Hi everyone! Before we begin our last segment of this episode, we'd like to thank you for listening. Putting a podcast together is a time-consuming labor of love, but knowing that someone is listening to our hard work and hopefully gaining something from it makes it worthwhile. Would you let us know you like the podcast by going to our website at emlc.net, click on the podcast tab, and write a comment. Tell us what you like and what you'd like to hear more of on our podcast. And even better, why not leave us a rating on iTunes? Ratings help us become more visible to more people. It's not about ego, it's all about service. Thank you, and blessed be.
Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be witches. Don't let them ride broomsticks and chant crazy spells. Burn so much incense that everything smells. Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be witches. Don't let them make potions in the light of the moon, reading old books that are written in rune. Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be witches. Don't let them burn candles and put stuff in jars and call on a little green goddess from Mars. Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be witches. Don't let them get naked and dance round the fire to satisfy every lustful desire. Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be witches. Don't play the maracas and drum all night through, then jump in the hot tub and make pagan stew. Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be witches. Don't let them come home with a neighborhood cat, dress all in black with a big pointy hat. Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be witches. Don't let them read tarot and talk to the dead. Make them grow up to be Catholics instead.